Включите. У тебе має бути включено. Не включений?
Включи. Good afternoon. I want to thank everybody who joins us. My name is Olha Atamanova, and it's my pleasure to see everybody who joins us in Ukraine Media Center Ukrinform. Today it's year 11 of the war, and today is day 799 of the full-scale invasion of our homeland by Russian aggressor. And now we will be talking about the situation in our borders. We will be talking about unblocking of the borders and about the changes that will possibly take place in this sphere. So joining us today is Andriy Demchenko, the spokesperson for the State Bodyguard Service of Ukraine. Mr. Andriy, good afternoon. So let's start our conversation with the effect of unblocking the border. On the 29th of April, we've heard that in the last checkpost that was blocked, the unblocking happened. So what is the situation for the time being? Is it true that our cargo trucks and passenger cars may easily cross the border with Poland? Good afternoon, everybody. Well, when the blocking was going on for the cargo trucks, fortunately the Polish farmers did not block the passage of other categories of transport like buses. Passenger cars, obviously there were some hours, some days when they scaled up their activities, and back then the movement of their citizens was complicated too. But generally they did not block the movement for their regular citizens. Talking about the cargo trucks, again, fortunately now all of the checkposts are unblocked. A couple of days ago the checkpost of Rava-Ruska, that was the last block, was unblocked last week. The biggest infrastructure checkpost was unblocked, the checkpost of Yahodin, and in fact today it can pass about 1,300 cargo trucks in each direction, because during the blocking by Polish farmers, I think there the smallest number of cargo trucks were let through comparing to its capacity. Then through Rava-Ruska and the previously unblocked Krakivets, Shehini, Ustyluch-Ugreni, the cargo trucks are passing in accordance with the passing capacity in every checkpost, and of course there are no more lines that were observed before when the Polish farmers were blocking all of the 6 directions, and there might have been more than 3,500 vehicles in line. For example, now in Yahodin there are 200 trucks waiting to cross the border, but again, given the current capacity within this day, they will be all able to pass. And the same situation is in other checkposts, so we hope that the Polish farmers are not going to resume their blocking activities to block our cargo trucks, and the cargo flow will be going smooth in both directions in all of the checkposts. Well, in continuation of the talk of our border with the European Union, what's going on with the violators? In the mass media we hear about the situations with the people who were trying to cross the border with TISAs. So what are the violations that you observe for the time being? Well, unfortunately the attempts of illegal border crossing are still documented until this time. Basically every day our teams detect the violators who try to cross the border, both in the green section of the border, beyond the checkpost. Also the violations are being attempted in the checkposts too, when the violators use the counterfeit documents or they try to bribe the inspectors of the State Bodyguard Service. Some may be hiding in different sections of the vehicles trying to illegally cross the border, but again the majority of the attempts is documented in the green section of the border. The areas where the majority of such cases is being attempted is the border with Moldova and Romania. and less such attempts are observed in other sections of the border. With, I mean, with Slovakia or Poland, where people attempt to cross the border illegally. Talking about every specific case, unfortunately, the violators neglect their life and health very frequently, choosing difficult mountainous areas, the areas of mountain rivers, and also their lives are neglected by the organizers of such dangerous trips, because the violators usually are not solitary participants of this process. Very small number of those detained by us were mentioning that they were making the route for themselves. Usually they mentioned that they were using the services of organized crime groups that promised them to assist in crossing the border, for which they paid pretty good amounts. And it's a pity that instead of donating to the armed forces, they enriched that criminality which specializes in illegal trafficking of humans across the border. And even when those organizers brief the people, they forward them through difficult landscapes, including the mountain rivers. There were multiple cases when people come to the border section and they see that there is a river in front of them, and they realize they don't physically have force to overcome this obstacle, but those who dare to do it, very frequently for them it happens lethally, because people end up losing their lives. In the mountain rivers, our teams documented about, I think, 24 within this year, no, during the effect of the martial law, but talking about the lethal cases, the cases that resulted in death due to such illegal trips. So the number of such cases is about 30, is more than 30. Well, horrible statistics. Well, the mobilization law is supposed to come into effect this month. Is it going to change the rules for crossing the border? Well, the legislation contemplates that the government should bring their regulations in compliance with their requirements of the law on mobilization, and shortly it's about to happen, because the law comes into force on the 18th of May, and we should expect that the rules for border crossing may be amended. I cannot tell you right now what will be those changes, but again, given the fact that the amendments were made to Article 23 on the law of Ukraine on mobilization and mobilization training on postponement of draft, we may expect some non-cardinal changes to the procedures of border crossing. So can we expect those who got such postponement, or those who were booked by their companies, would be able to cross the border? Well, basically now, in compliance with those rules that are in effect now, those categories of population are allowed to cross the border. The same story with the parents of multiple children, 3 or more children. It's clearly set forth in the rules that they are entitled to cross the border. Also, those booked can cross the border, but they should have them included on the order of the Ministry of Economy, just like those people who go on a business trips, for example, provided the presence of the relevant documents. Well, thank you. So let's talk about the other borders that are obviously of interest and concern to us, those colleagues of yours who fulfill their service duties in the forward edge of the battle area. So what is the function of the state border there. Well, forward edge is not a border, but yes, it's a front line where the state bodyguard service units also exercise their activities as an integral part of security and defense forces. Well, our guys work in different locations. For example, the Revenge Brigade from the Lugansk border section and other combined units in the front lines and near the front lines in the border with Russia. And the situation is the most complicated, I mean, among those places where the positions of our defenders are in Bakhmut and Novopavlovsk areas. The enemy continues assaulting the positions of the state bodyguard service using the assault teams, tanks, armored vehicles, and obviously those are the daily shellings that the enemies exercise using the artillery. However, our guys bravely hold their positions without letting the enemy penetrate through the defense lines. Our defenders are also stationed in the south of our country, in Kupiansk direction and other areas. So talking about Sumy and Chernihiv section of the border with Russia, how active are the sabotage groups there? Well, the border with Russia is mostly characterized with the daily shellings. The enemy uses artillery, drones, aviation, and lately the majority of the shellings falls on the Kharkiv region, a little bit less in Sumy and even less in Sumy region. So basically this is the situation that is unchanged within the latest period. Comparing it to the previous month, we, I think, may observe some reduction of the number of shellings, but they still remain at the level of February, because in March the enemy intensified significantly the shellings using aviation, and the majority of the strikes were falling on Sumy region, and our state bodyguard service teams in coordination with other security and defense forces documented more than 3,500 shellings. I mean, is the shellings only talking about the number of shells? They are way bigger. Well, talking about the sabotage groups, where is the enemy the most active? Well, the area where the enemy continues using their sabotage groups the most actively is in Sumy region. Such teams were active in Kharkiv region previously, but lately this activity diminished a little bit. In Chernihiv we also did not document a lot of activity of sabotage teams, but Sumy region is of priority to them. And in fact, we detect several sabotage teams per week. I cannot say that we detect a couple of them per day, but yes, a couple per week. Talking about the situation in the border with Belarus, what do you observe there? Are there any changes? Well, unlike the border with Russia, the border with Belarus is under full control. We do not observe any activities that would evidence about any preparation of the threat for our country. First of all, Russia doesn't have the battle units stationed in there. I've mentioned it multiple times that those Russian units that were staying in Belarusian training grounds on a temporary basis were gradually withdrawn by Russia, most likely to reinforce the front line, but they did not bring any new units under rotation. So in fact, Russia doesn't have any forces to prepare any repeated invasion to Ukraine. Also, we do not observe movement of material or personnel of the Belarusian army there, but again, nothing can be excluded because unfortunately Belarus continues supporting Russia in this war, and we still have to grow our defense capabilities along the borderline and along the front line, continuing to install fortifications to make sure that our guys who defend that area can take cover in case of shelling and exercise full-fledged battle operations. Dear colleagues, let's proceed to the questions from the floor. Good afternoon, Alla Shershin, Ukrinform. I'm having two questions. It's known that after the beginning of the full-scale invasion, visa regime was imposed with Russia. Do we know what is the number of Russians who crossed the border using visas? And another question is whether the passenger flow has intensified in the eve of the Easter. Yes, the visa regime is in place for the Russian citizens, but unfortunately I don't have any information about the number of obtained visa. I can prepare such information for the following briefing. On top of that, the visas are issued by our diplomatic institutions, our embassies, and in coordination with them we will be able to find out such information. But again, this number is infinitesimal. Even during the year when the visa regime was in effect, there were like about a little bit more than 50 visas. They're mostly issued for humanitarian purposes for those citizens who may have some Ukrainian roots, or who have spouses with Ukrainian citizenship, or who have children with Ukrainian citizenship. And there was another question about the passenger flow during the Easter holidays. Well, lately we can track it within the last 5 days. There is a tendency of growth of passenger flow. For example, last week it was fluctuating during the weekdays of 85,000 people in both directions, and there was no significant prevalence either on part of enter or exit. So starting from Saturday, the passenger flow has intensified. On Saturday it was about 110,000. On Sunday it was 105,000. Monday, Tuesday it reduced to 90,000, and yesterday it was about 95,000. But again, during this latest period, people are mostly coming into Ukraine. The citizens of Ukraine, 85% of those crossing the border are Ukrainians. And again, within these 5 days, the citizens of Ukraine crossed the border, entering to Ukraine 75,000 times more. So do you relate it to the holidays, or do you think that the mobilization law may have some relation to it? Well, I relate it to the Easter holidays because comparing to the Western Easter that was happening in the end of March, we were observing the same picture, where there was a surge of inflow, and then there was no significant influence until this very moment that is currently related to the Easter holidays. Thank you very much for this information. Dear colleagues, do we have any more questions on the floor? Well, now that we do not have, thank you very much for joining our broadcast. Let me remind you, joining us was Andriy Demchenko, the spokesperson of the State Bodyguard Service of Ukraine, and we are currently working on our schedule for tomorrow, so stay tuned, and glory to Ukraine.